He was described as handsome, charismatic, intelligent, a law student, a suicide hotline volunteer, someone who helped lost tourists find their way. He was also one of the most prolific serial killers in American history, and the two facts are not a contradiction. Because Ted Bundy was never charming, he was something far more unsettling, a perfect simulation of a human being. And understanding that distinction between genuine charm and manufactured simulation is the key to understanding not just Bundy, but a pattern of psychology that science is only beginning to fully map. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover changes how you see the people around you. Theodore Robert Bundy grew up without knowing who his father was. He discovered as a teenager that the woman he believed was his sister was actually his mother, that the man he called his father was his grandfather. His entire identity was built on a lie before he was old enough to understand what identity meant. Researchers who studied his early development noted something unusual. He was, by all accounts, a normal child, not visibly troubled, not isolated. He made friends. He was polite. He smiled at the right moments, but the smiles were always slightly off, just slightly, not enough for anyone to notice, but there in every photograph if you know what to look for. Psychologists call this masking, the deliberate construction of a social persona to conceal what's underneath. Most people mask occasionally. A psychopath masks constantly. It is their entire existence. Neuroscience gives us a partial explanation. Brain scans of individuals with psychopathic traits consistently show reduced activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear, empathy, and emotional connection. What this means in practice is this: Bundy did not feel what you feel when you hurt someone. He felt nothing. And in the absence of that signal, that neurological break that stops most humans from crossing certain lines, he had to learn consciously what normal looked like and perform it. Think about what that requires. Watching people, cataloging their reactions, learning which expression to produce in which situation, which tone of voice creates trust, which gesture signals warmth, building brick by brick a character that had no foundation in genuine feeling. It takes a certain kind of intelligence to do that, and it takes something else entirely to do it for decades without ever slipping. Every single victim account contains the same detail. He seemed trustworthy. He seemed safe. Something about him made you want to help him. His primary technique was what psychologists call manufactured vulnerability. He would approach women with his arm in a fake cast, or pretend to drop his books, or ask for directions while looking lost and harmless. He exploited the most fundamental human instinct, the impulse to help someone who appears to need it. This is not charm. Charm is natural, unconscious, rooted in genuine warmth. What Bundy did was a calculation. He identified the precise psychological trigger, our hardwired response to perceived vulnerability, and pressed it, every time, with precision. The women who survived described the same sensation afterward, a moment where something felt wrong, a fraction of a second where instinct fired, and then it passed. He said something that neutralized it. He smiled. He adjusted. The alarm went silent. That adjustment, that real-time recalibration, is the most chilling part of the forensic record. It means he was watching, not just performing, monitoring the performance, correcting in real time, like an actor who can see the audience and rewrite the script mid-scene. Dr. Robert Hare, whose research on psychopathy we covered in episode 1 with the Zodiac, described Bundy as a textbook case of what he called the mask of sanity, a term coined by psychiatrist Hervey Cleckley in 1941. The idea that beneath a perfectly constructed social surface, there was simply nothing, no guilt, no empathy, no remorse, just the performance. And here is what makes that scientifically significant. Bundy knew the mask was a mask. He was not delusional. He understood, with perfect clarity, that what he was presenting to the world was not real. He just didn't care. The mask holds until it doesn't. And when Ted Bundy's finally slipped, the timing was revealing. During his trial in 1979, Bundy chose to represent himself. He cross-examined witnesses. He argued legal motions. He sat at the defense table in a suit and smiled at the jury. And then, when the death sentence was handed down, he told the judge, "I think I deserve it," not as remorse. Forensic psychologists who were present described it as almost administrative, a statement of fact, as if he were acknowledging the logical conclusion of a process he had been observing from the outside. The confessions came later. In the days before his execution in 1989, Bundy confessed to 30 murders across 7 states. He offered details, names, locations, dates, not because he felt guilt. Every psychologist who interviewed him confirmed there was no evidence of genuine remorse, but because the confessions were the last thing he had left to trade, he used them to negotiate delays in his execution, more information in exchange for more time. Even at the end, the transaction was the point, not the truth, not the victims, the currency. One detail from those final interviews stays with me. When asked if he felt anything for the people he killed, he paused for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't know them," as if that were an answer, as if familiarity were a prerequisite for empathy. What he revealed in that pause, without meaning to, was the architecture of the simulation. He had learned to perform empathy for people he knew. And now we arrive at the part of this story that criminologists find most disturbing. Not Bundy, us. During his trial, women lined up outside the courthouse every morning to get a seat. He received thousands of letters in prison, many of them romantic. A woman he met through correspondence married him during the trial. Another gave birth to his child while he was on death row. The media called him handsome, brilliant, charismatic. The same word appeared in headline after headline, and in doing so, they completed the simulation. They did for him what he had spent his entire life doing for himself. They constructed a version of Ted Bundy that was more interesting than a man who felt nothing and hurt people. Anne Rule, the true crime author who knew Bundy personally before knowing what he was, wrote that she kept waiting to find the real Ted underneath the monster. She spent years looking for the person she remembered. She eventually concluded there was no real Ted. The person she remembered was the performance. This is what forensic psychiatrists call the halo effect of psychopathy. When someone is attractive, articulate, and confident, our brains assign them additional positive traits automatically. Trustworthiness, sincerity, depth. We do this without thinking. It is a cognitive shortcut, and it is precisely the shortcut that people like Bundy learn to exploit. The simulation worked not just because Bundy was skilled at performing humanity. It worked because we are predisposed to see it. Ted Bundy was executed on January 24th, 1989. He was 42 years old. In his final statement, he blamed pornography. In his final moments, witnesses reported he looked calm. The simulation ran until the very end. What Bundy left behind is not a mystery to be solved. His identity was never confirmed. It was never there to find. What he left behind is a question. If a person can learn to perform every human emotion with sufficient precision that the people closest to them never suspect, what does that say about the signals we use to judge who someone is? What does it say about trust, about connection, about the stories we tell ourselves, about the people we think we know? The most unsettling thing about Ted Bundy is not what he did. It's that no one saw it coming. Not his girlfriend, not his colleagues, not the criminologist who spent months interviewing him, not the woman who married him. And the reason no one saw it coming is that we are not built to see it. Our brains evolved to trust the performance, because for most of human history, the performance was the person, until it wasn't. If you want to understand more about how certain kinds of minds work and what the science actually says about them, subscribe. Every week, we go deeper into the architecture of darkness. One case, one mind, one pattern.